Welcome to Kian's Kiosk, insightful ruminations on the continuum of care.
Hello everyone, it's great to be with you today. This is Kian Sanei, founder and CEO of Independa. At Independa, we provide remote engagement, education, and care, including through our partnership with LG Electronics on all LG TVs, where our Independa Health Hub turns a commodity appliance into a bidirectional engagement to the world for remote social and clinical engagement, education, and care, including many 24/7 telehealth options and videos on demand, such as educational videos from the likes of WebMD, exercise videos, lots of free benefits, including a pharmacy benefit card, fun games, simplified video chat, and exciting photo and message sharing, and much more. All easily and comfortably accessible right on your large TV screen. Welcome to Kian's Kiosk Podcast, where I get to have insightful ruminations with healthcare leaders across the continuum of care. My guest today on my very first podcast is my good friend and esteemed colleague and physician and Independa Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Richard Della Penna. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks, Kian. Delighted to be here with you. I've been with you for, 13 years now, a long time as colleagues. Before I came to Independa, I had a career with Kaiser Permanente for 32 years and started off here in San Diego, but then moved to the Southern California regional activities and then finally to the national activities. And all of this work in most of my career was focused on the care of older people. Geriatric care. And so brought that background to Independa because at that point, the vision was to focus pretty exclusively on older people.
So one of the things, Richard, as you know, when you and I would go out together early on and to this day, is I would tell everyone I can't take Richard anywhere because where we go into meetings, everyone knew Richard and everyone wanted Richard to be on their board and everyone wanted to shake his hand and give him a hug and thank him for all that he's done. So that was always wonderful to see. Richard, you and I have a wonderful relationship across many dimensions. I'll share with the audience here. You are our chief medical officer from day one. You also decided to be an investor, one of our 5 founding investors. So that was amazing. And if you recall, I told you don't need to invest. You're getting shares as part of the team and so forth. You said, no, but I want to be part of this company going forward. And you've been such an amazing partner to have. So, Richard, I'm going to go back to our pact that we made early on. And if you recall, you told me, you teach me about business and I'll teach you about healthcare. And I always tell everyone, and you know this, I got a much better end of that bargain because I've continued to learn from you all the time. And I'm going to share the 3 things I thought about that you shared with me that have stayed with me and I use all the time. One was probably the most profound one was before I care about how much you know, I want to know how much you care. So I thought that was really amazing where you shared that with me as a doctor or in medicine.
The saying is, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care.
Exactly. Even better. So I've been using it the way I said it, but in both cases, it really goes to the point about care. And it brings me, I'll talk about the other 2 in a moment, but it brings me to the longest Life magazine article I've ever read. And that had you and you a few years younger. And I wanted the audience to hear about what I read, which was amazing to me. And tell us about the experience that you had, your role and what went on and how much you cared about the people you took care of. And that really made a big impact on me early on.
Well, right after I finished my residency in internal medicine in Boston, and serendipitous, almost like it was serendipitous that we got together, I was asked to begin to organize physicians to go down to a couple of the Massachusetts state prisons who had erupted in riots. And one of the main issues that was put out by the prisoners was that there was inadequate health care. So I always like to challenge and so accepted it and went down myself, got colleagues to join me. Very quickly, the colleagues fell off. I remember when I first walked into the first prison, my knees were shaking. I said, where am I going here? But at any rate, ended up having a 5-year career in prison healthcare, basically organizing systems that were non-existent or partially existent, recruiting staff, And to give you an example of the success of that was that in one of the prisons, the first day I was there, there were over 100 people on sick call out of a population of maybe 700 inmates. And the day I left, a little over a year later, we had 3. Because we, number one, took care of people's problems. Number two, we got rid of the secondary gain issues around drugs. And so we were able to really provide medical care. And some of my illustrious patients included the Boston Strangler. And so had an amazing career. Also, part of that was I then was recruited down by a hospital in New York City called Montefiore Hospital. And they had just signed a contract with the city of New York to take over the medical care at Rikers Island.
So Richard, what struck me at the time and since then is going back to how much you care versus how much you know. It was clearly you're caring about these inmates as human beings with health issues and challenges. And to me, the humanity of it was really amazing, where there were riots and these folks were protecting you. And during the riots, and yes. You had this special privilege because you took care of these folks, and they all signed something, if I recall, when you were leaving, and people that nobody would even be close to in any environment were, coming and wishing you well and saying goodbye and asking you if you need anything. So it really struck to me as an example of what care should be like, and it's not about the medicine; it's really about the care.
When you're doing it, you're doing it. You're not really thinking about other things. It's just there's a task to be done. But I think it really has to do with respect for humanity. You're caring. And so the prisoners were prisoners. Many of them had done some terrible things, but they were fellow humans. And again, if you take the approach of treating them like you would treat anyone else, although the environment is different, everything falls into place.
Yep.
So it was a very gratifying experience. And by the way, the reason I got out of it and came out to California, because this was back in New York, was my dad, who was also a doctor, said, I didn't send you to medical school to work in prisons. So become a real doctor. So that's how I ended up coming to California, because I was doing a lot of administrative work at that point, and came out to San Diego for a 6-month fellowship to kind of get brought up to date.
So the other thing that I remember, and I thought about, maybe 2 or 3 seminal moments together. You and I had many, many meetings with different folks. One of them early on was with a hospital, and we spent a couple of hours. The hospital shall remain unnamed. But at the end of the meeting, you asked me, did you notice, Kian, we never talked about care, and we talked about systems. And I thought that was really an interesting observation, that a lot of how we would fit into the world of healthcare has to do with systems, and where we would fit inside the existing system versus necessarily how we might improve care. And so as a company, we've always been smart, I think, in finding places where we can add value, maybe outside of discharge and in private pay. And what's happened over time is healthcare has come to us. So when we first started out, it was really all about older adults at home or in senior living, short-term rehab, et cetera. But really all of healthcare is really about the third point that you mentioned to me, which is healthcare happens in the home. So I thought that was really interesting, where you said early on as a doctor, I found out that the few minutes that I spent with someone, even if it's longer than a few minutes, is not where they're going to be healthy. It's going to be healthy when they leave and what they do in their home. And the vision that we shared with Independa was we can play a big role in keeping people healthy and comfortable and secure and independent longer, safer, more comfortably in their own residence, wherever that residence is, in their home or in a senior living group.
My career, when I came to California, it was going to be a temporary stay, but I ended up wanting to stay. It was a horrible winter back east and beautiful winter back here in San Diego, so stayed here and went to work for Kaiser Permanente, because I had seen the life my father led as a solo practitioner. I wanted no part of that. So joined the group practice and was a regular doc in the box, had hospital care and office care. And because I was willing to take care of some people for a short period of time in nursing homes, I got involved in taking care of some older people. And there was a physician who did this as part of his regular job, seeing people after they left the hospital, or even those who stayed for the rest of their lives in skilled nursing facilities. And so he approached me at a meeting and said, "Would you cover me when I'm on vacation?" And, I said, really don't know anything about these really old people, or not much, and don't know anything about nursing homes. But I'm thinking to myself, well, I jumped into prison healthcare. This should be easy. So at any rate, I began to do that for a couple of weeks at a time. Would have to go back to my office because I did this during the day. So the next day, I'd come back to the office and have a load of phone calls and patients who wanted to see me. And I'd get lost. There was no GPS back then. And I'd say, I'm not going to do this again. But the next time he asked me, I did. But as a result of that, when Kaiser in San Diego set up a geriatrics, what we called continuing care department, the medical director approached me and asked if I'd be willing to lead that effort. And I said, let me think about it, because I really loved my practice. And after about 3 months, he called me again and said, I really need an answer. There are other people that want to do this. And I said, okay, I'll do it. So left my patients, sadly, and left my practice and went into this, began to set up this new department, which included much community-based healthcare. So that's what brought me into homes. And so in that capacity, saw hundreds and hundreds of people over the years. And that's where, this comment about healthcare, most healthcare really takes place in the home, because that's where you see people in their own environment rather than in my office or in my hospital. You see the obstacles that they're facing. You see the social constellation that surrounds them. And so it's an entirely different experience. So when people ask me about that, I said, well, not only was it different, it was transformative in my looking at the way healthcare is delivered and what needs to take place. It was with that background that Kian met me as I was retiring from Kaiser Permanente.
So Dr. Art Flippen, who was introduced to me, as you know, from one of our board members at WebSense, he was the medical director of the Permanente group, and he was very interested in helping, and he was very helpful. He said, but, I'm interested, but the man, the person at all of Kaiser nationally is actually here in San Diego, and I'll talk to him about it. Let's see what he says. And the background is I had already launched Independa, and it was largely on the shoulders of a company called IDEO.com, and they're a phenomenal design firm. And I had asked them, why is this demographic completely void of any kind of technology success? The only successful brands were I've Fallen and I Can't Get Up, and basically the clapper to turn on and off your lights at night. And so they looked and did a project, and they came back and said, yes, there's a major opportunity. And what's missing is essentially, we're calling it today a platform or all-in-one, but at the time they said we need a person-centric approach to this individual for all the things that are important to them socially, clinically, medication reminders, everything, not just silos that have been built in the past. They said, but that's not enough. It has to be super easy to use. And of course, eventually Independa became a TV-based platform. We launched on tablets and then later uniquely on TVs. So that was the first item, and we launched a company based on that. And when Art introduced me to you himself, if you recall, Richard, the answer back from where I was sitting was, yeah, I spoke with Richard, and the email said he's not interested. He's looked at all these technologies. They really don't do the trick, and they've seen them all, and he doesn't want to get involved. And at that moment, I thought there is no Independa. So I thought IDEO may be wrong, and I may be wrong, and here's the expert, and he doesn't really see the value of what we're all about. And I asked Art if he would ask you, Richard, if we can have a call. And I thought fully well from that call that you're going to tell me all the reasons why this can't work or isn't the right thing or isn't unique and so forth. And so we got on this 1-hour call. You said this is actually very valuable, and I think there's something here. And so you literally, I always tell people there were two seminal moments in the creation of Independa. One was IDEO, and the second one was Richard Della. Because had you said, no, this doesn't make any sense, there would be no Independa.
We set up a meeting, correct?
Yeah.
And you came to my home, and we sat in the room right across the hall from me, and I can visually remember it. And you described to me what your vision was and what you would hope to do and plan to do. And at the end of that conversation, I said to Kian, this is something very different. And the thing that really struck me, and I think which convinced me, was the fact that we were addressing multiple domains. Now, in geriatric care, we don't look at the medical care, but there's who are we? We are cognitive, we're emotional, we live in environments, we're social beings, there's physical functioning. And what I could see in my mind by having this platform which integrated all the different technologies, we could aim the technology, supportive technology, to each of these domains. Of all the different things that Kian had in mind, the social connectivity was the thing that impressed me the most, because that's absent. When people go into doctors' offices, one of the big complaints is that I'm in and out, and the doctor really doesn't know me, the doctor didn't really understand me, and doesn't really know much about me. And again, putting that person in a social context is really important for the individual, for the doctor, and for the people around the individual.
My goal for the meeting was to essentially get validation. I had no idea we were going to embark on this journey together. You turned to me and said, this is different, like you said, and you said, how can I help? And I said, well, you can be an advisor, you can be a friend, you can be a investor, you could be a chief medical officer. And you said, well, I'm going to come on board as a chief medical officer, and the rest is history. So in many ways, Richard, you've been the soul of the company in the sense that you've always kept us true to our initial vision, as I have attempted to, and that is to really be different and be super simple to use and have that vision of being an integrated platform. And we do a lot of work, as you know, to be simple. And oftentimes you do come back and say, well, we can do this one better, we can do that better. So I think your marketing skills and your design skills are far ahead of my medical skills in our partnership. So
the mutual commitment was that I would, again, as you mentioned, teach you about geriatric care, medical care, and healthcare systems.
Yep.
And the part of the deal that came from you was, I said, I don't know much about business. When you're a doctor at Kaiser, you don't really worry about business. Other people do that. And the second thing is, I know how to use a computer and a cell phone and a few things like that, but I really don't understand technology. So let's have an exchange here. And so I think we've lived out that deal, Kian, for, as I said, a dozen years.
So let's bring it back to here and now and today. And, of course, everyone can go visit us at independa.com. Also, for those who may not know, we're the healthcare platform on LG Consumer TV. So if you buy an LG TV from 2021 forward, you'll see Independa there. And there's a lot of services that you can get, many of them for free. So we have lots of services from games to picture sharing, message sharing, video chat, discount pharmacy card, and so forth. But you can also get 24/7 access to doctors, to dentists, to coming down the road physical therapists. Today, you can also get mental health. You get video content for WebMD. It just goes on and on. So we're really excited about this ecosystem. It's unique to us. And so, Richard, where do you see us today and where we're going with that?
Before I answer that, let me just add something that I have not mentioned, which I think is really important. And that is that when I was really in the trenches here in San Diego with the geriatric care program being set up and then, growing. By the way, that started off with 2 doctors, and today there are 24 physicians in that department delivering community-based care here at Kaiser in San Diego. One of the things that was a continual problem, and we had a meeting yesterday here in San Diego with an organization, and again, it's the same type of problem. It's how do you take human resources and amplify them in an environment where you have many frail older people or not so frail older people, and be able to see them, to be in contact with them, to monitor them in the sense of finding out if something isn't quite right and someone needs to intervene. And again, we never had the human resources in our care management program here in San Diego to meet the demand. So they would have an initial assessment, give some advice, and the next thing would be to call me when you need me. With the technology that Independa has developed, the ability to amplify human resources is tremendous. So the reach that anyone, doctor, nurse, social worker, for example, can have is so much greater, and it can be instantaneous in the sense of being alerted to when something, again, happens that shouldn't happen and needs quick intervention.
Along those lines, as I was mentioning, so we're on the LG TVs on the consumer side. We're also embedded inside LG commercial TVs. So LG has been a fantastic partner of ours for so long, and all the awards and everything else that we have, credit goes to them for integrating at the WebOS level something that doesn't exist elsewhere. So you could be watching anything on any input, any channel. You could be playing a game, and you could still get a notification that the doctor's visiting, or it's your time for your medication, or you just got a photo, and so forth. So with that, Richard, where do you see us as a company fitting? Where do you see healthcare going? What's our role in your mind? Having been around for a few years with us together.
Where we are today, I think different in many ways from where we started. I think the core principles, our core DNA are the same. But originally we were on a tablet, as you mentioned earlier. Our market was primarily just older people. Where we are today is, as you said, available on tablets and on TVs, on anybody's preferred device, whether you're on the caregiver, professional side versus recipient side. They use the device that they're most comfortable with. And so that's a real expansion of different technologies for the interfacing with the people who use Independa. There are things that we have available to us on our platform which I never thought were possible. And again, I'm going to address more the medical care part of it. And I'll use as a good example our partnership with the wellness network WebMD. I'm in the hospital, I'm in the office as a patient, and someone is giving me instructions on what I should do when I leave the office or the hospital. And a lot of information is given to me, either verbally, but probably for sure in writing, and for older people often it's in a very small font. And I go home and I say, now what do I do? And the ability to deliver video content, both about the condition I have, but also about how to take care of it, as well as even a personalized video that's created for people like me through the Independa platform, is amazing. Amazing.
And by the way, I'll just note, not found on the internet, right? You can't do a Google search and get this, medical grade content that is not available through searches anywhere. So that's very exclusive.
In a healthcare system using Independa, there's the potential for them to actually push to me the content that I need to look at.
Sure.
That's, again, transformational, because you always talked about the last mile of healthcare. The last mile, it's probably the last 100 miles between when you leave a healthcare facility and you get home. And again, now I'll hark back to my experience when I used to make so many house calls. You'd go into a house, you'd see all kinds of bottles of medications, different instructions, take one of these as needed, or take it 3 times a day and then as needed. And people are saying, I forget what the as needed is. So different ways of someone trying to organize their medication. So again, that connectivity, both through a visual check or contact with an individual, as well as another example, being able to deliver vetted, highly qualified content to them on everything from coronary artery disease or kidney disease.
So Richard, on a personal note, I've been in technology my whole life, my professional life, and it's been fulfilling every step of the way. But with Independa, the stories that we get, the validation, the stories that the people share, where someone's mom passes and I get a personal text from the person that says, thank you for what you've done for us. And the family got to enjoy mom, and she was a part of the family. Even though she was bedridden, we could share things with her on the TV wherever we were together, and she felt included. And then the most touching thing is that coming out of the funeral home, Dad, the first thing he asked is, can I keep the Independa system? And the reason was all the pictures that were shared were still on the system, and he was sharing those with friends and family as they came and visited, because nobody prints pictures anymore, and even when they do, it's small, and this is a big screen. So those types of things. Or the gentleman from Italy that wrote to one of our customers that said, I'm getting closer to my mom as she's recovering in your short-term rehab community after hip surgery than she was when she was back home, because I get to talk to her every day on the TV. I know her so much better, and we're engaged so much more than just on the phone. So we all have lots of stories like that. And on a personal note, for me, this was really fulfilling. So that's what drives a lot of us in the industry, and I know all of us at Independa, is to be able to make that difference in people's lives.
What you said is, I think, really, really important. Again, that ability to connect with people is so important. And when we talked about the geriatric care management program here in San Diego, one of the things we were able to do, I talked about how the demand so exceeded the supply of people that we had to really follow them closely. But some of the volunteers to the hospital system actually came over to work in our department, and they would make what we call friendly visitor calls, maybe every week, every 2 weeks, to the people that we had contact with. And not an atypical answer at all or comment would be, the only other calls I get are marketing calls, and this is years ago. You're the only person that calls me. And I'm not making this stuff up. This is real.
Well, I'll give one more example like that. It always makes me cry almost. But we had a DME company, one of the leaders, that shared with us that they changed the way they changed their oxygen tank replacement. And they were all really happy because they had less truck rolls and they were visiting people less. And so that was great. It was good for business. They weren't intruding on people's lives. And they ended up starting to lose clients. And they looked into it and they realized oftentimes they were the only contact with that person. And so they would change vendors so that they can maintain that touch point more instead of less. So the lady would, get dolled up and make teas and biscuit ready because it was the day that the company was going to come and replace the oxygen tank. And when that didn't happen as often, they wanted to make it happen often. So we don't really necessarily all appreciate and value the engagement that we have normally, but when things get closed out, and maybe we lose the right to drive and lose the car keys and friends pass away and so forth, suddenly we find ourselves maybe looking forward to the oxygen changing guy coming once every few weeks.
When I joined you, I was what we would call a young old. But over the years, I've moved into the category of older old. Before too long, I'll be in the oldest old category. But you're absolutely right. As we get older, our contacts and our activities begin to change. And a simple thing, one of the features, we're not really talking about too many of the features, just mentioning them, that the Independa platform offers is the ability for example of a grandchild, somebody being out and about, say at SeaWorld. And I'm the grandparent, and I'm otherwise, pretty much housebound. And what pops up is a notice about a photograph that my grandchild sent with a little message that said, "Hi, Grandpa, we're at SeaWorld, missing you," and that's it. But what a difference in a day or a week something like that could make. Sounds simple, but very powerful. And to get that on my TV.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as a reminder for everyone who may not know us well, but we have a patient education system, like we touched on it, with lots of content and surveys, real-time surveys and so forth at the hospital, all the way to the other side of the bookend, which is the consumer on LGTV, and everything in between, which is senior living, short-term rehab, home care, home health, assisted living, independent living, and so forth. So I think we're unique in that way. And in healthcare, it really is much more about wherever you are in the continuum of care, how can we keep you from going to the next stage or even just the next episode of care for as long as possible. So it's been exciting to get here with you. I don't know, I'm going to throw a curveball. What's one thing before we go, Richard, that people should know about you that nobody knows?
About me?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I had a very classical education. So I took Greek and Latin both in lots of philosophy, but the Greek and Latin in high school as well as in college, in my pre-med course. And by the way, one of my really famous classmates who took the same course of what was called AB Pre-Med Greek, so figure that out. What that meant is you took enough science to get into medical school, was Dr. Tony Fauci.
It's something people don't know, so that's one thing, yeah.
What I was leading up to is that in my study of Greek, forget about the Fauci thing, but in taking this classical course, we read the Odyssey in Greek. And
In Greek.
in Greek, classical Greek.
Wow.
I can hardly read Greek letters these days. It's such a faint memory. But at any rate, the Odyssey begins with a word describing Odysseus called polytropon. And polytropon in Greek means many turning or resourceful. And so I think, I don't know if people would think of me that way, but I think I'm polytropon. I think about my career, straight medicine, suddenly into prison healthcare, geriatrics, technology, maybe not so resourceful, but at least I've turned in many different directions. Most people, when they meet me, aren't aware of that, what I call a very rich background.
Well, you are polytropon for sure, including since I've known you. So it's been great chatting with you, Richard, and it's been such a pleasure working with you. You're an amazing partner, and what a journey we have and have yet to continue. So thanks for making time on our first podcast, and it's lovely to spend time with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We always would love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. You can leave them for us at podcasts@independa.com. That's plural, PODCASTS, at independa.com. And make sure you follow us on your favorite podcast platform. I'll be ruminating with more thought leaders on future podcasts, and do hope to see you then. In the meantime, stay healthy and happy.